Mr Maley, the Animal Protection and Related Legislation Amendment Bill 2025, Serial 32, to move the bill be read a second time.
Leader of Government Business.
Madam Speaker, I move the bill be read a second time.
I call the next speaker to speak in the debate. Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to speak in support of the Animal Protection and Related Legislation Amendment Bill 2025. At the outset, Madam Speaker, I want to place on the record our thanks to the Scrutiny Committee for their thorough inquiry conducted into this bill. Their work has ensured that it comes before the House and it has been carefully considered. This has balanced and strengthened the voices of stakeholders and the concerns raised across the community to then be put into good law and practice for the Northern Territory. Madam Speaker, I can only hope that more legislation will have this same robust and very careful and methodic process of scrutiny committees and have the opportunity to be properly scrutinised through the parliamentary process. As we spoke about earlier today, only 6 of Northern Territory pieces of legislation out of the 29 in the last 12 months have actually been able to go through the scrutiny process. So it is a very valuable process. I thank the Chair for presenting back the committee report today before the House. We're obviously our Labor team has a member on the committee, so the process has been very robust. It's been very important to improve the practices, to look at regulations as much as the actual legislation as well, to make sure that the laws across the Northern Territory have been modernised, improved, developed and made for the better across the Northern Territory. So we are very happy on behalf of the opposition, our Labor team, to support this important legislation, but again highlighting the values of scrutiny through the scrutiny process. So I urge the government, the CLP government, to continue to have that good practice and not to pick and choose what should be scrutinised or not. Madam Speaker, I'd also like to acknowledge the member for Goyder who tabled Evie's bark petition, which has provided our parliament with the opportunity to confront head-on the deficiencies in our animal welfare laws. That petition and the tireless work of its organisers and the signatories gave voice to a widespread community demand for stronger protections across the community when it comes to animal welfare. It demonstrated that when Territorians see injustice, whether it be against people or animals across the Territory, that Territorians do want to step up and improve laws and call for change for the better, Madam Speaker. In today's debate, Madam Speaker, in many ways the legacy of the advocacy of those signatories is one of the most significant aspects of this bill when it talks about broadening the definition of an animal. This is not a minor technicality, it is a recognition that our laws here in the Territory must also evolve alongside scientific understanding and indeed community expectations. Madam Speaker, in the past, narrow definitions have left gaps that exposed animal cruelty without adequate recourse. By broadening the definition, this bill ensures that a wide range of creatures, those capable of experiencing suffering, are properly protected under Northern Territory law. Madam Speaker, this is a reform that aligns with the Northern Territory with contemporary standards right across Australia and, importantly, reflects the compassion and decency that our Territory community expects. This bill also introduces a critical reform by doubling the maximum penalty for failing to provide an animal with the minimum standard of care. This is also an important step. Too often we've seen horrific cases here in the Territory where animals were left without food, water or medical treatment. We welcome this increase in penalties, Madam Speaker, but we also want to place on the record that, given the seriousness of some of the vile incidences that have been witnessed across the Territory in recent years, there is a case perhaps for considering whether even harsher penalties may be justified through this amendment. 2 years imprisonment or 200 penalty units may not reflect the gravity of some of the offences of sustained neglect or cruelty to animals. We are prepared to work with the government, Madam Speaker, in future to ensure punishment truly fits the crime and that the community sees justice, because the community rightly expects that those who abuse and neglect animals will face real consequences. Madam Speaker, our team support the introduction of specific obligations that clarify what caring for an animal means in practice. These are not burdensome requirements, they are very basic responsibility of ownership, Madam Speaker. The bill now makes it clear that any person in control of an animal must, provide access to clean water and shelter at all times, provide a hygienic living environment appropriate to maintain the animal, seek treatment if the animal is diseased, injured or suffering, not confine or restrain an animal in a way that denies it the ability to move appropriately for its age, condition or size, and not abandon an animal, Madam Speaker. Each of these obligations addresses a gap that has been too easily exploited, unfortunately, Madam Speaker, in the past. Abandonment in particular has been a blight and something that the Territory community has been calling out for and now will see integrated through this legislation. Too many Territorians, Madam Speaker, have seen tragic images of dogs left on chains in backyards or cats left behind, abandoned in houses, slowly suffering without the proper care that they need and deserve. And this bill rightly makes abandonment an offence. These reforms set a clear standard across the Territory, Madam Speaker, that if you take on the responsibility of caring for an animal, that you must provide it with the basics of life. Anything less is cruelty. Madam Speaker, as I mentioned, we thank the Scrutiny Committee for their work in examining the use of prong collars. The evidence they received was clear that these devices cause unnecessary pain and suffering for a creature. The bill strikes the balance between creating an offence for their use while ensuring legitimate training methods that promote welfare and positive behaviour do remain available. And this, Madam Speaker, in our view, is sensible reform. Training should be about building trust and respect between animals and humans, and not about inflicting pain and causing neglect and cruelty. We support this provision wholeheartedly, Madam Speaker, and I think it is modernised it is modern in the expectations of the Territory community. Madam Speaker, there are provisions in this bill that are direct responses to the horrific crimes committed by Mr. Adam Britton. It is difficult to speak of those crimes, and unfortunately, I know that many people have unfortunately read some of the horrific and unspeakable acts, such as was the depravity of this particular individual. But it is important, Madam Speaker, that this Northern Territory Parliament does acknowledge that our laws failed to anticipate such cruelty, and that this bill ensures that those failures are never repeated again in the Territory law. And Madam Speaker, I take a moment to reflect and acknowledge the animal welfare teams who investigated this particular individual and some of those horrific things that they uncovered, the evidence that they had to go through, and I know that many of those hardworking public servants were unfortunately traumatised themselves in that role, and I really do hope that they are getting the support that they need in the really horrific work that they had to do, which has culminated today in further protections through the Northern Territory law. But our team does offer them our thanks for doing that work. It would not have been easy, and we do hope that you are also being able the opportunity to heal, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, these changes we are passing today reflect the hard lessons that have been learned from that case I mentioned, and they strengthen protections, close loopholes, and also send a clear message across the Northern Territory community that cruelty of that kind, of that horrific nature, will not be tolerated in the Northern Territory, and there are severe consequences for anyone who thinks that that is okay. Overall, Madam Speaker, what this bill achieves is the modernisation of our Northern Territory Animal Protection Act. It updates the terminology to reflect contemporary standards. It increases penalties where necessary. It clarifies obligations in plain enforceable terms, and it responds directly to both community advocacy and expert recommendations. Most importantly, Madam Speaker, it reflects what Territorians expect in the year of 2025, that animals should be treated with care, respect and compassion. And Madam Speaker, I take note that I believe Dean is in the gallery. Thank you, Dean, for the work that you and your family have done in advocating, and the other signatories, as I mentioned earlier, Madam Speaker. So thank you for being here today as well, and the amazing work you've done to support the changes in the Northern Territory law. Madam Speaker, the laws alone will unfortunately not eliminate cruelty, but our stronger laws are the foundation of enforcement education and cultural change across the Territory. And by modernising this Act, we give our enforcement agencies the tools that they need, and we give the community the confidence that their compassion is reflected in modern-day contemporary Territory law. And while we support this bill, Madam Speaker, we also acknowledge that this must be the beginning, not the end, of the journey to improve Territory laws and improve animal welfare across the Territory. Animal protection is an evolving field. Community expectations will continue to grow, and cases will continue to test the adequacy of penalties and definitions. New issues will arise as science advances, and our understanding as a people, Madam Speaker, deepens with the needs of reflection around the needs of our different animals across the Territory that are cared for. We continue to commit to working with the government, Madam Speaker, with the sector and with the Territory community to ensure the Northern Territory laws of this Parliament keep pace with community expectation and also with Australian standards nationally. Madam Speaker, the work of this includes revisiting penalties, and if they prove that they are too lenient, considering further reforms perhaps around breeding, around sales, around exploring more comprehensive frameworks for animal welfare in remote and regional settings, just as much as our urban settings, where enforcement can be challenging. Before I move to my closing remarks, Madam Speaker, it is important that this Parliament recognise the tireless work of the organisations across the Northern Territory that continue to dedicate themselves, their energy, their efforts, their funding and their love and compassion to animal welfare every single day. Madam Speaker, I'd like to place on the record our appreciation and thanks to groups such as the RSPCA NT, Paws Darwin, Animal Management in Rural and Remote Indigenous Community, or AMRIC, most people would know it as, the Darwin Animal Rescue Group, and the many smaller rescue and foster networks across our towns, regions and our communities who do extraordinary work, often with very limited resources and relying heavily on volunteers and donations, such as the groups of wildlife carers, etc., Madam Speaker. These organisations are on the front lines. They are the ones that are called upon when an animal is abandoned or abused or found lost. They're the ones who provide shelter, rehabilitation and ultimately a chance for a second life. They're the ones who travel to our regional and remote communities, working hand in hand with residents and manage animals' health, population, education programs, as well as welfare in culturally respectful ways. Their work will not only save animal lives, but also builds awareness and educates our community on the responsible ownership and humane treatments of our Territory animals. It is one thing for this Northern Territory Parliament to strengthen the law, Madam Speaker, but it is these groups who see the reality on the ground every day, who provide the care and who give effect to the compassion that this bill enshrines. And on behalf of my team, Madam Speaker, I do thank them sincerely for their service to animal care, protection and welfare across our community. We owe them a great debt of gratitude and the strong commitment and ongoing support for their work across the community. Madam Speaker, this bill is a significant step forward. It strengthens protections, modernises our laws and reflects the values of compassion and decency that Territorians hold dear. And I want to again thank the work of the Scrutiny Committee and the member for Goyder, who I mentioned, the petitioners behind Evie's Bark petition, and all of the community advocates who have made this debate possible and have focused on improving animal welfare across the Northern Territory. It is often said that the true measure of society is how it treats its most vulnerable. Animals cannot speak for themselves. They cannot petition this Parliament or advocate in committee rooms. They rely on people, on lawmakers, on those enforcers and those carers to act in their best interests. Madam Speaker, with this bill, I believe that the Northern Territory takes a meaningful step towards ensuring our animals are treated with the care and dignity that they deserve across the Northern Territory, and I commend the bill to the House.
Member for, Member for Drysdale.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I too would like to thank the Minister and his team for the work they've put into this bill. I'd also like to thank the committee and Madam Chair, the member for Wanguri, and my peers, the member for Goyder, member for Johnston, and the member for Gouger. And I had the privilege of being on that committee as well. And who would have known puppies could bring the Parliament together, Madam Speaker, but they certainly did. And for all the confrontation we have in this chamber, which I embrace, and it's an important part of what we do, it was great to see, you know, an issue like this, a really uniformed approach from everyone in the chamber. So it has been, I really do thank my committee colleagues for all their individual work and to where we've gotten to today. I'd like to make a special mention to Sarah Gerritsen and her cat Kiara from my electorate of Drysdale, and that I hope in some small way the carrying of this bill will put her at peace as well for her and her cat Kiara, who's now deceased. But Sarah, I know this is important legislation for yourself. And I'd also like to thank Member for Goyder for his work in advocating from the very beginning for the passage of this bill. At its crux, you know, our pets deserve dignity. And I think that is something that is echoed across the community. And it's important that our pets have that dignity and are not seen as property. My electorate has a very large amount of pets who we all love. I have a pet myself, Blue, my golden retriever. And the fact is we deeply love our pets. You know, when my daughters draw a family picture, Blue's always in that family picture. And it shows how deeply we do bond with our animals. And so for me, it was really important through the committee process, through the writing of this legislation, that I know for a lot in my electorate, we use kennels when we go away on holidays, and it was really important that people know that there will be a minimum standard that they can expect for the welfare of their animal. And I am confident that this bill has real teeth in punishing individuals or businesses who neglect that welfare of the animal. And so, yeah, I can say to my electorate, there is serious consequences, and this bill has serious teeth to those that are going to neglect their animals, and also just in the community as well. As I said, we have a huge number of pets, and it is unfortunate, if you walk around Drysdale, you can see neglected animals. I've seen it myself. And so this bill also aims to address that and giving the dignity to our common pets throughout the community. We're also banning cruel practices like prong collars, improper vehicle restraints, and the misuse of electrical devices. And I think that's very much in step. We've learnt a lot in the modern training of dogs. I'm an avid believer in responsible pet ownership and making sure you have a trained and well-behaved dog. It's both safer for you, it makes a happier pet, and this bill ensures some antiquated practices are removed as well. And ultimately, we're recognising the loyalty animals have to us, and this bill, we are showing that loyalty back to them. And I commend everyone in the chamber that supports this bill for that. Ultimately, Madam Speaker, it goes to the heart of what our country Liberal Party is about. You know, we're stepping up on personal responsibility for pet ownership. It's a duty, it's not a hobby. And so there is genuine responsibilities you take as a human being in this society when you take the step to pet ownership. And that extends also to businesses, and that they have a duty to the welfare, and that the state will enforce that duty, Madam Speaker. It also ensures respect for law and order and giving real teeth and consequences to those that cut corners on welfare. We simply will not allow individuals to cut corners when it comes to the welfare that our pets deserve. It also safeguards against the opposition leader spoke to it, some of the horrendous case that came before the Northern Territory. And I have a good friend who had to endure listening to that trial, and I know for him it was a deeply distressing event he had to take part in hearing the crimes that were committed. And so we're directly addressing that moral decline and saying that that is not acceptable in our society, and we will up the laws, up the consequences for anyone who engages in such just straight-out depravity. I think we all agree it's just a shocking incident in our history, but at least, you know, we have responded. We have responded as a government, and no one would accept that behaviour, but we will take actions to ensure that there's a line in the sand against such depravity ever occurring. And ultimately, Madam Speaker, it strengthens our institutions. We're empowering our authorised officers to act when an animal is at risk. We are giving our authorised officers greater powers to step in and look after the welfare of the animals in our community. And I, Madam Speaker, think that is a very good thing, and for that reason I will be gladly supporting this bill. I once again thank the Minister, I thank the committee and all in the chamber for passing this bill today. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Member for Port Darwin.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today in support of the Anti-Animal Protection and Related Legislation Amendment Bill 2025. These amendments provide stronger, clearer and more enforceable legislation to protect animals from harm. Right now, in far too many places, the laws meant to safeguard animals are weak, inconsistent or riddled with loopholes. Well, not here in the Territory, Madam Speaker, after today. Here in the Territory, we recognise that animals feel pain, joy, fear and love. We know that animals are sentient. Science confirms it. Experience confirms it. Anyone who's ever seen a dog cower in fear or a rescued horse learn to trust again knows that they are not things, they are lives, they feel, and because they feel, they deserve protection. And that's why, Madam Speaker, this amendment bill is so important. These amendments recognise that animals are sentient beings under the law, not mere property. Significantly, these amendments importantly recognise the role animals play in our lives. They give voice to the devastation experienced by Anitra and Dean Jackson when they lost their beloved fur baby, Evie. Dealing with a family emergency, Anitra and Dean left Evie along with their second fur baby, Woffie, at a pet boarding house, believing they would be safe and well cared for, not realising, as I believe all pet owners in the Territory would have been equally unaware, certainly, Madam Speaker, as someone has used kennel facilities in the Northern Territory in the past, I was not aware that such commercial enterprises were unregulated in the Territory. So much so that some 14 months after losing Evie, they remain in the dark as to what went wrong, denied answers and justice for Evie. The amended legislation, Madam Speaker, provides new inspection powers in connection with premises used for commercial purposes such as boarding kennels, as well as puppy breeding operations, cattle holding yards and premises used for training and racing of animals. This ability will increase compliance with the anti-animal protection laws, which will include minimal level of care obligations and the creation of offences where a person has failed in their duty of care, obligations to provide animals with appropriate and sufficient food and water, appropriate accommodation and living conditions, appropriate treatment for a disease or injury or when suffering, and not confining or restraining the animal in ways that are appropriate and not abandoning an animal. Had these inspection powers and minimum levels of care been in place previously, the Jacksons at the very least would have had an avenue through which they may have obtained answers as to what went so wrong with Evie's stay in that boarding kennel. By ensuring stricter penalties for cruelty and neglect, Madam Speaker, the amendments also treat serious abuse as the crime it truly is. And both the Leader of the Opposition and my colleague, the member for Drysdale, have referred to the heinous case that the Northern Territory experienced in recent times. These amendments will include new criminal offences to cover and increase the penalties in that sphere, and will also extend the cover to production, dissemination and possession of animal crush and bestiality material. So to assist with better compliance and enforcement of the NT animal welfare laws, it's further proposed to also have a number of additional welfare codes and standards which will make it much easier for those of us who have pets to know where to go when we need answers and how to get help when we need them, whether that's our animals used in racing or in connection with a commercial purpose. Madam Speaker, the changes proposed aren't radical. They're reasonable. They're not anti-business, but they are pro-compassion. And most importantly, they are just. Anybody who has experienced the love of a fur baby knows just how important it is for us to keep those babies safe as they are part of our families and a critical part of our lives. Protecting animals is not about choosing them over people. It's about acknowledging that kindness, decency and justice are not limited resources. In fact, they grow stronger the more we practice them. How we treat animals reflects who we are as a society. These amendments ensure we are a society that protects the vulnerable, that acts not just out of convenience, but out of conscience, that chooses to stand up for those who cannot stand up for themselves. And it's beholden on all members of our community, Madam Speaker, to ensure that animals have a voice and that we do not tolerate cruelty in any form in our community, but rather progress a culture of care for all creatures, great and small. Because when we protect the voiceless, we raise our own voice in defence of a more just, humane and compassionate world. I commend this bill to the House. Thank you.
Are there any more speakers? Member for Goyder.
Madam Speaker, I rise today to speak in strong support of the Animal Protection Related Legislation Amendment Bill 2025. This bill is about more than updating legislation. It is about the values we hold as Territorians: fairness, responsibility and compassion. It is about the way we treat those who cannot speak for themselves. It is about ensuring that the Northern Territory has some of the strongest and most modern animal protection laws in the nation. Territorians care deeply about their animals, whether it's the dog that greets you at the gate, the horse that carries you through a muster, polo cross field, or just mows the lawn, the cat that curls up at the end of the bed, or the birds and fish that brighten our homes. Animals are family. They enrich our lives, support our livelihoods, and remind us every day of loyalty, joy, and unconditional love. Our responsibility, then, is clear: to make sure they are safe, protected, and treated humanely. And Madam Speaker, this bill is a greatest hits of common sense approach towards animal welfare. And I thank the member for Nelson, the Minister for Agriculture and Fisheries, and his team for bringing this important bill to the Assembly. The journey leading us here today was a marathon, not a sprint. This bill comes after an extensive review of the previous legislation, with over 4 months of initial consultation and an additional month with the LSC. There's been hundreds of submissions that have been received. These submissions came from families, local government councils, universities, legal experts, former MLAs, racing organisations, the RSPCA and everyday Territorians. And Madam Speaker, the message from that consultation could not have been clearer. Territorians want strong protections for our furry friends. They want tougher penalties for those that do the wrong thing and better oversight. They expect their government to close the gap, to give our hard-working animal welfare officers the tools they need, and to ensure that cruelty, neglect and abuse are met with real consequences and tougher penalties. And beyond the formal submissions, Madam Speaker, we on this side of the chamber have also heard the advocacy from everyday Territorians directly when we're out and about in the community. I first met Dean and Anitra Jackson at the Fred's Pass markets, and I acknowledge the presence of Dean and supporters in the gallery today. We organised at the time to have a formal meeting in my office, and they told me the story of Evie the Cocker Spaniel and their horrific experience with a boarding kennel, which led to petition number 12, which we debated in this assembly last month, and the inclusion of a code of practice for boarding facilities and kennels in this bill. All of us in this chamber know the joy and comfort animals bring, but we also know the heartbreak of losing them. The story of Evie the Cocker Spaniel, whose short life has now inspired reform across our territory, was a very touching story. When Dean and Anitra Jackson trusted a boarding facility to care for Evie and her mate Waffy, they expected, as any of us would, that their beloved dog would be safe, fed and cared for. What followed was every owner's nightmare. To this day, her family has not had the clarity they deserve about how she was fatally injured. Madam Speaker, more than 2,000 people signed that petition, called Evie's Bark, calling for reform. Each of those signatures is a voice calling for change, calling for accountability, and calling for laws that truly protect our pets. Dean and Anitra's advocacy in Evie's name has helped shape this bill. This bill features the introduction of a code of practice for boarding facilities and doggy daycares, the first in Territory history. These codes set enforceable standards so that families who leave pets in care can have confidence their animals will be safe. They also support industries and communities by making clear what the best practice looks like. Dean and Anitra's courage has ensured that the future Territorians will not suffer the same preventable heartbreak that Evie's premature death happened. Wrong word. Sorry. Now, Madam Speaker, let me run through the greatest hits of common sense contained in this bill. This bill creates new minimum care offences. What this means is that if someone fails to provide the basic minimum care to an animal, be it food, water, shelter or treatment, our animal welfare officers will be able to issue infringement notices. This is about giving frontline officers the tools they need to act early, to educate where possible, and if that doesn't work, they can prosecute when necessary. This bill also increases the maximum penalties for cruelty offences and fixes a legal technicality around beating animals. Madam Speaker, this bill adds the words "or suffering" after the word harm to better clarify the offence when an animal is beaten and it constitutes cruelty. This change was necessary to fix a legal loophole that doesn't pass the pub test, so we're fixing it. This bill also modernises the requirement to restrain dogs when travelling in the back of utes and trailers. Every Territorian has seen a dog riding in the back of the ute, sometimes safe, sometimes not. It's often very cute when you pull up to the traffic lights and you get to see a dog staring back at you. But these changes in this bill improves the readability and the clarity to make it clear the requirement to restrain a dog or dogs when riding in the back of utes or trailers down a public road. Now, Madam Speaker, I've had constituents come into my office after witnessing the horror story of a dog bouncing behind a ute while they were desperately trying to flag down the driver. It is awful. Now, Madam Speaker, these laws make it clear, and it'll be simple. When transporting dogs in the back of your ute and your trailer, they need to be safely secured. No ifs and or buts. These changes make the law clear and the penalties enforceable, while acknowledging that working dogs used in stock work have an exemption in line with Territorians' expectations. This is not about cracking down on the farmer out on his property. This is about making sure that when Territorians are transporting their animals at 100 k's an hour down the road, they're keeping them safe and they're preventing anyone else from having to witness that trauma and torturing a dog to death. Next on this list, Madam Speaker, this bill gives authorised officers the ability to enter locked vehicles to rescue animals in distress, such as from heat. This will allow our hard-working animal welfare officers to respond promptly to save animals from suffering or dying a horrible death. If you're heading to the pub for a few hours and planning on leaving your dog locked in the car on the back of a tray in the sun, you're a moron. It's not good enough, and now the animal welfare officers will have the power to break your window, break the lock, and get the dogs out, and be able to rectify the situation promptly. This bill also bans prong collars in the Northern Territory. These devices cause pain, distress and harm to dogs and have no place in the Territory. For those that don't know, it's basically a chain link collar with prongs that dig into the neck of the animal that when tightened it pinches and constrains the neck. Now I know there are some people listening today who disagree with the move of including this ban in this legislation, including from my own electorate, and I acknowledge the contributions that we received to the Legislative Scrutiny Committee report and their advocacy, but this bill is about protecting those without a voice, and these devices are being misused and causing harm in the Territory. This bill also clarifies that using electrical devices on the sensitive part of an animal, such as their face, udders or genitals, constitutes cruelty. It's a shame that that's needed to be included, Madam Speaker. That behaviour is not training. That behaviour is not about controlling an animal. It is abuse, and this bill makes sure the law says so. It's another common sense change. This bill also increases the maximum penalty for bestiality from 7 to 10 years imprisonment. This change is in line with the community expectations and also introduces a new criminal offence for the production, possession and dissemination of animal crush material. I will not be defining animal crush today as it's in the bill and it represents some of the darkest cruelty humans are capable of. These are some of the most serious and abhorrent acts imaginable. By strengthening these laws and increasing the penalties, we are drawing a clear line. Such offences are intolerable and will be met with harsher penalties. Madam Speaker, other common sense changes contained in this bill include allowing for the collection of blood and other samples when investigating racing offences, and allow for the inspection of commercial facilities, like I mentioned before, with boarding kennels, breeding operations, doggy daycares, racing facilities, to make sure that everything is above board and our animals are safe and not being mistreated. It also includes code of practices and standards for camp drafting, rodeos, greyhound racing, and the aforementioned boarding facilities and doggy daycare centres. And Madam Speaker, this bill is balanced. It recognises the importance of iconic Territory traditions like camp drafting and rodeos, while ensuring welfare standards are in place. It supports responsible practices and ensures the continuation and social licence of these activities while cracking down on cruelty and neglect. And Madam Speaker, these changes aren't just about the law. It's about family. It's about knowing that when you leave your dog at a kennel, it will be cared for. That when you send your horse to get trained, it'll be safe. And that when you see a dog riding in the back of the ute, it is restrained and safe. These increased penalties matter. They send a strong message that cruelty and neglect will not be tolerated. They provide a real deterrent and give the Territory the strongest animal welfare laws it's ever had. The additional powers for our authorised office and animal welfare officers are reasonable, practical and targeted. They give officers the authority to intervene before tragedy occurs rather than after. It's about confidence. Confidence that our laws reflect our values and that the government is doing its job to safeguard what we love. And it's about compassion, because how we treat animals says much about how we are as a society. And Madam Speaker, this bill ensures that the Northern Territory is not left behind in animal welfare. It makes us a national leader. It delivers stronger protections, tougher penalties and better safeguards for animals across our communities. But more than that, it honours Evie's bark, it honours Dean and Anitra's courage, it honours the more than 2,000 voices who signed the petition, the more than 400 people who put in submissions across the entire process to get here today, and all those calling for change. To them, I say, your voices have been heard. This government is taking action, and the action that you put in has delivered real reform. This bill sends a simple message. In the Northern Territory, cruelty will not be tolerated, neglect will not be excused, and the welfare of animals will always matter. I commend this bill to the House.
Are there any other speakers? In closing, Minister.
Members who made their contributions to this critical bill, and also thank the member for Goyder for his contribution. And I know that he's very passionate about animals because I've been to his house and it's like going to a local zoo. Madam Speaker, also thank the Scrutiny Committee for its careful consideration of the report, and I also thank the Chair and the committee members for doing what they did, and also the public who took their time out to make contributions. Thank you for the work you've done, not only looking after the bill, but preparing the report and outlining some of the matters that were raised about the legislation amendments. The aim of this bill is to ensure that the Northern Territory has some of the strongest animal protection laws in Australia, and the government is committed to ensure that the NT animal protection laws meet the evolving expectation of the community. Animals deserve to be safe. They are our furry friends. These new laws will strengthen animal welfare safeguards and enforce the toughest penalties for animal cruelty offences and sexual involvement with animals offences. The amendments to the cruelty offences to the Criminal Code represent the doubling and, in some cases, tripling of the penalty maximums or imprisonment if Mr Britton was to have committed these shocking crimes today. The Legislative Scrutiny Committee only made one recommendation for the bill, and as I understand, as a part of its consideration, the committee were invited to submissions from dedicated animal welfare groups and members of the public, and I thank you again for those people who took their time and their feedback. The only recommendation is not proposed to adopt that recommendation, as it is an exempted use for the electric shock prodders on livestock animals, including crocodiles, is adequate and providing that protection in another section, so we think it's already covered. Amendments to the Animal Protection Act 2018, the Animal Protection Regulations 2022 and the Criminal Code aim to provide greater protections and enforcement for all animals in the Northern Territory, including supporting industries that are important to the Northern Territory economy. As honourable members are aware, the legislative reforms in this bill have been informed through direct engagement and consultation across a broad range of stakeholders and the community, including a public Have Your Say campaign. Madam Speaker, the main amendments in this bill talk about in relation to existing duty of care offences under Section 23 of the Act, and the maximum penalties are increased from 100 penalty units or 1 year imprisonment to 200 penalty units and 2 years imprisonment. Inserting new strict liability, specific minimum level of care offences categories, these new lower level offences are aimed to providing greater compliance and enforcement flexibility to our frontline officers, including the ability to issue infringement notices. In relation to the serious animal cruelty offences in Section 24 of the Act, the maximum penalties are increased from 200 penalty units or 2 years imprisonment to 300 penalty units or 3 years imprisonment. A new offence has been inserted relating to the possession and use of prong collars on dogs. Section 34 of the Act is also repealed and replaced to provide clarity as to the need to restrain a dog when travelling in the back of a ute or trailer. The main amendments contained in the bill also clarify and provide new authorised officer entry and inspection powers, including the ability to seek additional information to better identify a person as part of an investigation or for issuing enforcement notices, clarify the ability of an authorised officer to enter a locked vehicle or premises in an emergency to rescue animals in distress, provide new authorised officers entry and inspection powers where a place has been used for commercial purpose, such as boarding kennels and doggy daycare centres, and where premises are being used to train and race animals, and the ability for an authorised officer to collect samples such as blood from an animal connected to an offence. The regulations are being amended to provide for more clarification around the use of electrical devices on animals. This will provide more guidance and certainty to the industry and the community while ensuring animals are better protected. Additionally, the regulations will insert new animal welfare codes of practice and guidelines for regulating camp drafts, rodeos, boarding kettles and racing of greyhounds and horses. The bill also amends the Criminal Code to introduce a new serious offence to the Criminal Code to cover production and distribution of and possession of animal crush material and material relating to sexual involvement with an animal, with a maximum penalty of 5 years or 5,000 penalty units if it's a corporation. It also amends the Criminal Code to increase the maximum penalty of the offence sexual involvement with an animal from 7 years to 10 years. These amendments respond to the reprehensible cruelty offences committed by Mr Britton and aim to provide better protections and enforcement for all animals in the Northern Territory. The amendments in the bill also align with other states and territories to ensure the Territory has some of the toughest animal protection laws in Australia. Madam Speaker, these laws will strengthen animal protection safeguards, enforce the toughest ever penalties for animal cruelty offences and sexual involvement with an animal offences. Territorians have seen shocking cases of animal cruelty in recent years, and the community telling us that they are sick of offenders appearing to walk away with a slap on the wrist. Once these new laws are passed, those who commit the same kind of shocking animal cruelty and animal sex offending, like those done by Mr Britton, may be looking at a very long time in jail. I wish to thank everyone for their involvement in the development of this bill. I'd like to thank the Biosecurity and Animal Welfare branch located within the Department of Agriculture and Fisheries, and the officers attached to the Attorney General, and of course my own staff, and all the people who are involved in making submissions. Madam Speaker, the critical legislation does not happen without the expertise and hard work of departmental experts and professionals, and I wish to thank all the stakeholders and community members and organisations who made contributions and made submissions in relation to this, and my Animal Welfare Advisory Committee. Particular thanks to Anita and Dean Jackson, who are here today from Evie Spark, who have engaged in meaningful negotiations for the past 16 months or so, and I hope these new animal protections law serve you and your community well. Finally, I wish to thank Parliamentary Council for the dedication in making sure this bill is legally sound and represents our intentions. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
The question is the bill be now read a second time. Those of that opinion say aye, to the contrary no. Aye. I think the ayes have it. The clerk.
A bill for an Act to amend the Animal Protection Act 2018, the Animal Protection Regulations 2022 and the Criminal Code.
Minister.
Madam Speaker, I seek leave to move the third reading.
Is leave granted?
Aye.
There be no objection. Leave is granted. That's what, yeah, okay.
Yeah,
so you object. Okay, so we move on to consideration in detail.
Order. The Assembly will consider the Animal Protection and Related Legislation Amendment Bill 2025, Serial 32. Are there any particular clauses people wish to highlight?
Yeah, clause 6 or 7.
Clause 6, clause 7. Any other clauses people wish to raise? Okay.
No.
Okay. Is it the wish of the Assembly that clauses 1 to 5 be considered together? Aye. There be no objection, it is so ordered. The question is that clauses 1 to 5 stand as printed. Those of that opinion say aye, to the contrary no. Aye. I think the ayes have it. Clause 6. Member Farrell.
Just a couple of questions. Minister, under this bill, is it your expectation that if inspectors come across a case where several dogs are found with serious health problems, such as animal with parasites on it, untreated infestation and open wounds, will those responsible be able to receive any written warning, or is it your expectation that they will receive meaningful punishment?
Thank you. So the first step in this process will be education and in relation to helping the owner of the animals deal with that in relation to giving a medication. And then the next step after that will be an infringement notice.
Is that like a warning,
The first bit will be education, which will be trying to help the owner of that dog or animal to prevent it from happening, which would include a warning. Yeah. And then if it happened again, then it's up to the discretion of the animal welfare officer and the circumstances of the case. But this legislation does allow for an infringement notice to be issued at some stage.
Thank you, Minister. Minister, can you explain that this new section will be give the public confidence that severe cases of animal neglect will no longer be met with warnings? Similar to that last one.
Yeah, it's really, it'll be a case by case, and our officers are experts and they have been in the industry a long time, and they will use their discretion in relation to, this is about education and stopping the suffering of animals. That's the main goal. And they will do whatever they need to do to stop those animals being suffering. The first part will be education, there will be medication given, and then they can move down the line if there's repeated offending. Again, it's a case-by-case scenario based on the discretion of the authorised officers.
Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Minister, just in regards to when you're speaking about education, is there a set out pro forma or framework around what that education looks like? Or is that something that's discretionary to the animal welfare officer?
It's face-to-face and it's discretionary.
Okay.
Minister, will there be any clear guidelines to ensure consistency so that in cases involving obvious visual suffering ain't dismissed lightly?
No, every case will be assessed on its own merits.
Thank you. If inspectors find animals left with untreated infections to the point of significant injury, what new enforcement tools will in this bill would apply? Would owners in such cases face fines, bans, or disqualifications from owning animals rather than discretionary warnings?
We're talking about Section 6 here. You know, there's different levels of care, so I'm just trying to work out exactly. I don't think your question goes to this level, but it will be a case by case. I'm just trying to answer some of your questions because I'm not sure how many you've got there, but it'll be the maximum penalties are 200 penalty units or imprisonment, and it'll be assessed on a case by case using the authorised officers' experience in relation to the animal, because like I said, the goal here is to stop the animal suffering. Education will be used the first tool, and then after that there will be they'll move forward with penalties and infringement notices.
Any further questions? Clause 6. Leader of the Opposition.
Is it as you've said, a case-by-case basis for the education, and then before it goes to a written infringement / then it would move forward to penalties? Is there a case where, in the intention of the clause, a education opportunity would present itself, but then it could go straight to penalties, or would you go to the infringement then penalties?
It would be case by case, and if the authorised officer went to the same property on 3 different occasions and that education hadn't worked on the first occasion, it would be up to the authorised officer's discretion. And again, I think if you throw a bit of common sense in there, if they go in there and there's a new dog on the premises and the dog's suffering, the education obviously hasn't worked, well then it'll be up to discretion. And what I'd be saying, if it was me now, that there comes a time where you can only educate so much, and it's time for penalties to kick in. Again, it'll be a case by case, just like if the police do it every day. You know, if you get pulled up for speeding, maybe you get a ticket, maybe you don't. It depends on the circumstances, but the police do use their discretion, and so will these authorised officers.
Minister, do you agree that cases of obvious animal neglect should always attract penalties rather than warnings? And if so, will this bill deliver on that expectation?
I am trying to give you some leeway in relation to we're doing clause 6, but my expectation is that animals should not be harmed, and this bill is about stopping animals being harmed, and the authorised officers use their discretion and then the powers of the Act to deal with that. And I just want to limit it because we are going off clause 6.
Any further questions? Clause 6. Any further questions? The question is that clause 6 stand as printed. Those of that opinion say aye, to the contrary no. I think the ayes have it. Clause 7. Member Farrell-Furrow, did you have any questions?
I'm not sure yeah, I think that's it.
Okay. So if we're okay on clause 7, Is it the wish of the Assembly that clauses 7 to 39 be considered together? Aye. There being no objection, it is so ordered. The question is that clauses 7 to 39 stand as printed. Those of that opinion say aye, to the contrary no. Aye. I think the ayes have it. Is it the wish of the Assembly that the remainder of the bill be taken together? There being no objection, it is so ordered. The question is that the remainder of the bill stand as printed. Those of that opinion say aye, to the contrary no. Aye. I think the ayes have it. The question is that the bill be agreed to. Those of that opinion say aye, to the contrary no. Aye. I think the ayes have it. Minister.
Madam Speaker, I move that the bill now be read a third time.
The question is that the bill be now read a third time. Those of that opinion say aye, to the contrary no. I think the ayes have it. The clerk.
A bill for an act to amend the Animal Protection Act 2018, the Animal Protection Regulations 2022 and the Criminal Code.